Here's what's coming up on episode 97 of the Big Seance podcast. Diane and Denise of the History Goes Bump podcast.
It's more a family rather than just a community and just listeners. And it's so amazing when you think about that these people take the time to try to come out and meet up with you.
Yeah, and they're such a great group. We really do love our spectacular crew. They are so much a part of the success of the podcast and who we are.
And they add those little pins to their lanyard.
I was just
that
going to
is such a cool idea. I'm not one of those people that cover my head, though. Are you a head coverer, or do you have to? I have to see. If I cover my head and can't see what's coming up on me, oh my gosh, forget it. I'm out.
I'm a head coverer. I don't want to see it.
Oh, that's so great. That's so scary to me.
Those are the episodes that we get the most emails and stuff about in return.
Wow.
That people are the most excited about and are like, oh, I know that place. That's near here. Or I went to that university. And I'm always like, wow. The reason why this one is the most impactful, I think, of all the experiences that I've had in my life is it was a shared experience. And there is absolutely no way that this could have happened any other way than something supernatural, paranormal. Nope.
Well, that was worth the 4-minute clip. Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Hi, Patrick. Listening here in California, and I wanted to reach out and let you know how very much I truly enjoy your shows. It's perhaps a late start into listening to the Big Seance, but it's something I look forward to regularly. Thank you for the great guests. Thank you for the great job you do, and I hope we're going to hear more of you in the future. Have a great day. Bye.
Well, I wish I had your name, but thank you so much for that feedback. And while I'm thanking people, I want to be sure to thank Dr. Toboggan from the Hysteria 51 podcast, who gave a 5-star rating and said, "Love the show, great production quality and sound on top of great content. Keep it up." Thank you, Dr. Toboggan. Well, let's get right to today's episode. Not quite 2 years ago, back in episode 40, I interviewed today's guests, Diane Student and Denise Moormeyer, for the first time. And so if you find this conversation interesting, definitely go back and listen to episode 40. Some of you may decide to go back and listen to the other one first anyway. If you decide to do that, we'll still be here waiting. Just don't forget to come back. The History Goes Bump podcast has a tagline: Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. And that's the goal of the podcast, to take listeners on a virtual tour of a place they may never have the chance to visit, and to entertain while possibly sharing something listeners may not have heard before. You probably heard their voices as they visited me here in the parlor in the last episode, as they reported their takeaways from our time at the Haunted America Conference. Well, now they're back, and we're gonna catch up, so let's get to it. Diane and Denise, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Patrick. How are you?
I'm great. It's almost like we just talked to each other like 4 seconds ago for the last episode.
I know, it just, time flies. It just is crazy.
But it really does seem like forever ago that you were actually on the show. That was 2 years ago, and I listened back to the episode today. I know you said you listened to it, and it just seems like a whole lifetime away for some reason. I guess that's because we were all of us were so kind of early on in our podcast journey. So 2 years ago just seems like a long time ago.
That is so true, because that's what I was thinking when I was listening back to it. It was almost like listening to us back in high school or something. It's like, this is back when we really didn't know what we were doing yet. And we were all kind of fresh and a little wet behind the ears and didn't have a whole lot of downloads or anything yet. So, yeah.
Well, I probably was still pretty afraid of microphones because I didn't like microphones at all.
Yeah, you've probably grown a little bit in that area, wouldn't you say, Denise?
Yeah, I've gotten much better.
And we just got to hang out in real life again because we all went to the Haunted America conference again for the second year. And you both reported your takeaways in my last episode with coverage from the conference. And I am so impressed, and I mentioned this in the last episode too, with the number of spooktacular crew members who met you this year. It's your, the people who are involved in your Facebook group and do meetups with you. You really do have a massive community of active listeners around the country.
Well, we do. And I think you kind of get the feel for it too, Patrick, because you have more than just a community. You're building a family as well. And that's kind of how we feel our listenership is it's more a family rather than just a community and just listeners. And it's so amazing when you think about that these people take the time to try to come out and meet up with you, and they want to hang out with you. And it's so funny. You probably get this too. Is they'll say, "Oh, it's like I'm starstruck, or I'm fangirling, or fanguying, or whatever, and you're a celebrity." And it's like, no, we're not.
That always makes me chuckle.
A couple of nerds.
Yeah, we're just all a bunch of nerds doing this thing, and it's very humbling to see just how many members you get or how many listeners you have listening to the show, downloads that you're getting. It just every day shocks me that more than just my mom and dad are listening to the podcast.
Well, I mean, I love my community, and I have so many awesome para-nerds, but one thing that you guys do are meetups, and your meetups grow so much. What's the secret to cultivating such a fun and active community that comes out and meets you all over the country?
I don't know, because I'm the one who gets to do more of our social calendar since I have no knowledge of technology at all. And I don't know, it's just, I don't know how that even started, but we were going somewhere and we're like, well, we're going to be doing this ghost tour. And it just kept blooming from there. And so it's like, we're going to be here and a couple people would come and a couple. And then it just kind of became something even bigger, and it keeps growing. It kind of has taken on a life of its own. It's like I get to kind of steer the machine a little bit, but it's really taken on a life of its own. And then people will say, oh, we want to do this. So I'm like, okay, wait, let's see if we can make it happen. So
I think a lot of it is just being very personable with people and approachable. If we had these big egos or something and we weren't communicating with people on social media, I think they would not be as prone to come and meet up with us. But I think because we are so interactive with them, they feel like they know us and we're always in their ears when they're listening to us. So I think they feel like they know us. So it's not as hard to come meet us in person. And then they want to meet us in person because they want to put faces and voices and everything and names to everything, if that makes sense.
Well, and also, Diane, along those lines, I think it is too that we invite them to come meet with us. So it's not like they have to come and hope that they can maybe get a picture or whatever. It's we invite them. We say, hey, we're going on a road trip, and these are the ghost tours we're going to do. If anybody wants to come on down. This is where you book your tour, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. And we've had several people on our road trips stop by, but I think partly is because we invite them to come. They don't have to come find us. We ask them if they would like to come meet us.
So you give them the opportunity and they show up. That's cool.
Yeah, and they're such a great group. We really do love our spectacular crew. They are so much a part of the success of the podcast and who we are.
And they add those little pins to their lanyard.
I was just
that is such
say,
a cool idea.
It's the lapel pins. I'm sure of it.
Well, actually, there's some people because I just got our next shipment. So series 2 is here. And so people are like, yay, when's the next meetup? So they really do like their pins. So that was just an idea. Part of who I am is I like to track things. So like I have one of those pin maps for us. So we have a pin map where we put the pins in all the places we've gone, and we have the map on the camper that we put the stickers on every place that we've gone. I have passport books for national parks, state parks, lighthouses. So I like to track what we're doing. And so I'm like, oh, well, let's do the pins. And I'm like, well, we can't really do a different pin each meetup because the cost would just be way too much and we'd have too many pins left over. And so when I was like, how do we do this? How do I make it? I was like, oh, we could make it like a marker. And so we came up with the lanyards that have black and white ghosts. So once you go on a meetup, you replace the black and white ghost with your colored History Goes Bump pin. And so then it is like a tracker where people can be like, oh, you've been on 2, or you've been on 3, and you've been on 4. And they seem to really like the pins. And so that was just a harebrained idea that I came up with at the last conference, actually, when we were doing the ghost tour. And so I got the pins ordered and made it happen. And now people are like, oh, I'm getting my pin. And it's really an exciting thing for them. So I'm glad that they liked it as much as I liked the idea of giving them these little fun pins.
I think it's genius. Do we know who has the most pins?
I think Tammy McCarroll Burrows probably has the most at this point because she met up with us also on our other road trip. Mm-hmm. So I think she's got the most. I think she's up to 6.
Yeah, because she's done Alton. She's done Alton both years. And then she met us in Asheville, North Carolina to do a ghost tour with us. So
badge of honor. Well, your podcast came on the scene actually a few months after the big seance. And yet, as of this recording, you guys have 208 episodes. And if you're paying attention, this is probably episode 97 of my show. You know, what's changed since the start of the journey, and how in the world do you pump out that much good content?
Because Diane's a workaholic and she works her butt off for the podcast.
I sometimes look at podcasters like you, Patrick, and go, why didn't I go that route? It'd be so much easier. We have cut back on some of our production just because when you first start a podcast, as you know, you're really excited about it. And you just want to put out all this stuff and you keep wanting to make another episode and you're so excited. And then, you know, we're almost 3 years into this and you kind of start to lose some of that steam. And you're like, you know, I want to start getting my sleep again and want to have a little bit of free time to sit around and watch TV and vegetate if I want to. So
read a book.
Exactly. So putting out that much content has been a lot of work. Mostly it's like Denise says, I have a real drive to work. I'm a type A personality, so it's easier for me to do that. But we also, for quite a few months, we had a lot of our listeners were helping out with the research. And even now, we have a lot of them that will join us on episodes. It's amazing to watch how the podcast first started and what it has become now, because we never really interviewed anybody and we didn't have listeners who were on with us. And now we have quite a few episodes where a listener will join us and share their perspective about certain locations that they've been to, if they've had any haunting experiences there, or occasionally we've had authors come on that can share a little bit about locations. We try not to have too many of them just because a lot of other podcasts like yours do that. And so we want to be a little bit different and make it more of a listener thing rather than just a bunch of experts, that kind of thing. But yeah, it has been mind-blowing to see where we've come. I never thought we'd have this many episodes behind us, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, and part of the thing is that it was getting to put out that kind of content when you're working full-time and doing other things. We just had to pull back a little bit until ultimately we want Diane to be able to go full-time to where she can just research and edit and everything, but we're not at that point yet. And so it literally was that she was working every second that she wasn't working her full-time job. And I was like, no, we need to have time just to be with the family, to do things, to go kayaking. You know, we didn't want to lose the other part of our life for the podcast, because whenever you do that with anything that you love, then there can start to be, you know, you can start to resent doing that. And we did not ever want to resent History Goes Bump. So we pulled back a little bit.
Right. That's important to have family time and lifetime. It's important balance.
Absolutely. Otherwise you burn out and then it's not, you know, it loses as well as you. So it's just kind of a double whammy. So we wanted to keep it very balanced and still just love doing the podcast, which we do.
Well, one of the things that I think distinguishes your podcast, you were talking about wanting to do things that were different than others, is now that you have 208 episodes and more by the time this airs, people can go travel all over the country and pick different haunted locations, and you just search through and find the episode that you need and plug and play as you're going through and touring the place. You give them the background information and different reports of hauntings, and you do sometimes interview people in the know and people who have stayed there. And I think a lot, as podcasting gets popular, I think a lot of attractions are starting to do that. They might have their own podcast, or kind of like in the old days when you'd put the straight up cassette tape and the headphones on and walk around as you're touring a museum or something like that. I think it's cool. I don't know that there's much out there like that.
We've been kind of playing around with the whole idea of doing walking tours and making it so that it's something that people can listen to that's not just a typical episode, but that is an actual, now walk a block and here's this on your left and here's this on your right. We've kind of toyed with that as well, but this is definitely something that's real handy. It's great for listening to in the car. I think it gets people excited about going to a location because they're like, oh, I've never been to, say, the Lemp Mansion, and they can listen to our episode about it. So they're already prepared before they get there. And just like when we were there for the conference, we were eating our lunch in the suicide room. And so we already kind of knew the history behind that because of our podcast, and we'd done the research for that. So it adds that little extra something to it. You're not just going in and going, oh, I'm just eating in this old building.
What I should have done when I stayed there overnight by myself is go back and listen to your episode before I did that, because I really kind of went in blind. I mean, I've been to the Lemp a few times and I've, heard the stories, but when you don't really commit those things to memory, you're not. So I wasn't even for sure exactly what went on in the room that I stayed in. So I'm sure if I would have listened to your episode first, that would have changed my experience quite a bit.
Yeah, but then it might be good just to go in blind, because then you're not going to be sort of going back to like the psychology of hauntings and stuff. You don't have something that might be kind of already put there that you can make happen. If anything happens, it's just going to happen. You know what I mean?
True. That's very true. Because I've experienced that too. Like when I stayed at the Stanley, I was nothing but peace and loved it. It was cool. Then all of a sudden, after the first night of staying there, I decided to watch ghost hunters clips of them investigating my room. And then that night was a completely different atmosphere just because I had all of that in my head.
You saw a little boy saying red round, red round.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you made sure you had the covers up tight.
Oh, yes. And I'm not one of those people that cover my head, though. Are you a head coverer, or do you have to? I have to see. If I cover my head and can't see what's coming up on me, oh my gosh, forget it. I'm out.
I'm a head coverer. I don't want to see it.
Oh, that's so great. That's so scary to me.
Well, and the other thing that I don't know if you knew, but like our listeners suggest a lot of ideas. And so the other thing, when people are traveling, not only do they have our podcast, but we actually have History Goes Bump ambassadors in different places all over the world. So
that's right.
If they're wanting to know something, then we have people that have just volunteered to be the contact person in that area. And I have a list of them. So they'll like email and say, what do you know about, like, let's say Northern California, and I'll just put them in touch with our ambassadors who are the real pros that know the local haunts. And all we ask that they do is go and do some of the tours in the area so that they know. And we said if they want to do other things like, oh, this is a great place to eat or this or that, then that's fine. But mainly if they could just go on some of the haunted tours so that they could recommend. And so we have those people working behind the scenes, helping us out when we have people traveling as well.
Again, there's that community again.
Yeah.
So you guys also keep a list of suggestions for locations to cover. How do you guys keep up with that? And are you like 5 years away from being caught up?
Oh my God. If people could see how disorganized I am, I finally, because I used to just write it all down on a piece of paper. And then I started noticing that I would have multiple times that I've written down the same place with names. And I'm like, I need to get this a little bit more organized. So I've put it in an Excel spreadsheet that I still need to update because I have another page that I've written out again.
On napkins and everything.
And what we had been doing is we were kind of doing it in order of people suggesting it, but we wanted to make sure that we kept it so that it wasn't all in one area, so that we're kind of bouncing around and maybe go over to Europe this time and then up to Canada this time and then down to Australia and then do a couple in America, so we weren't getting saturated in just one area. But lately what I've been doing is when people make a suggestion, I'll say, do you want to come on the show and share a little bit about your experiences there? And generally speaking, probably 8 out of 10 times they'll say, yeah, I would love to. And that, boom, bumps it right up. So that's kind of what we've been doing lately, is throwing those ones in. And then when we start running out of people to be on with us, then I go to the list, and I've been kind of trying to do it in a certain order. And I mean, there's some that we've had on there that people suggested probably 2 years ago that we just haven't gotten to yet. And it was so funny that you said what you did, because we have a truck driver. And one time in the Spectacular Cruise, she was like, what are we going to do when Diane and Denise run out of places to have on their show? And I was like, and I looked over at my library that I have of all these haunted location books and such. And I'm like, we're never going to run out, so don't worry. So we'll be doing this until we're old ladies, and we're talking like we don't have any teeth.
Well, one of us is already an old lady, but I still have a few teeth.
You'll just be heads in jars by that time in the future. What do you think your listeners like the most about your show? Do they tell you?
I think it's our chemistry. If I based it on comments that we've gotten, both in emails and also reviews, I would say it's the chemistry between us. It's probably people's favorite thing about our podcast, because let's face it, there's a lot of podcasts out there that they can listen to that talk about paranormal stuff or haunted stuff. So I think that's one of the main draws for our listeners, is just us as hosts.
Yeah, I think it's that. And then also, we know we've gotten a lot of comments about it just feels like you're sitting down with a cup of coffee talking to friends.
There's no other Diane and Denise out there on any other podcast. I can tell you that for sure.
Unless they're in another dimension. It's, there's those extra worlds out there that there are evil twins on another plane.
Wow, you have opened up to some other concepts. No, I'm just kidding.
I tell you, my theories have gotten crazy, and the way I think about ghosts and stuff definitely have changed over time. But I think that's the main thing is us personally. And then I know for a lot of people, it may be a specific location that draws them in. They're searching for, let's say, the Stanley Hotel that you'd mentioned, and they're like, oh, I wonder if there's a podcast out there about that. And then they'll listen to that episode, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, let me check out some other ones. So sometimes I think it's specific locations that draw people in as well.
Well, speaking of your thoughts on things changing, I want to play a clip from your last appearance on the show, and it's one of my favorite moments from that first episode. And it's a longer clip. It's like 4 minutes or something, but that's okay. And then I want to get your thoughts afterward. Cool?
Sounds good.
All right, here we go. Is there any controlled situation I could create where either of you would consider joining in on some kind of spirit communication? What would make you feel safe and okay about tempting the spirits?
We're on the big seance right now, aren't we?
There we go.
Hey, we go into the Haunted Mansion almost every time we go to Magic Kingdom, and it always says, beware, a ghost could follow you home.
So you're not even following your own rule.
I know, but a ghost hasn't followed me home yet.
That you know of.
That's such a good question, Patrick, because, I mean, there are times that we have, like, we'll hang back on a ghost tour and try to catch things on camera, either taking pictures or, like the lamp that we caught on video. We'll try to catch stuff like that. So there have been times that if we know, like, they'll say a certain ghost has been somewhere, we might say, are you here, Timmy? We? Okay, I say, are you here, Timmy? If you are, if you want to move something or say something. So we do stuff like that, and I'm comfortable with that. I think what I get really worried about is actually trying to, like when Karen Dahlman talks about channeling, that freaks me out.
Really?
That freaks me
I didn't even have to bleep that. It was just silent.
I just bleeped myself.
She bleeped her own self.
Yeah, anything with like channeling, that's always kind of freaked me out. And I don't know that I would ever ask a psychic like personal questions for myself about maybe something in the future, because I really don't want to know, or to talk to somebody for me. Now, if I had that actual interaction, or I have no problem with actually talking to somebody who may have passed away, you know, to say, I miss you. Are you there? You know, that kind of thing. I don't have problems with that. It's just I have certain limits about what I'm willing to do and not do.
And I think probably a lot of us do. And I think we all change and kind of grow as we learn or experience things. And, you know, when I kind of started this nerdy journey from the paranormal craze, you know, I had some different thoughts and opinions, I think, than I do now as you talk to people. And I think it's just when you have something like this that isn't tangible, that you can't just put your hands on, I think you're going to get that. And I think it's okay. You know, everybody has their different place in it all. And
it depends upon experiences as well. For us, as you listen to more people who tell you their stories, and they're people that you trust, or you have experiences yourself, it starts to move you away from that skeptical side of the needle. Because I used to be way skeptical. I thought no psychics, actually, it was all a bunch of frauds and mediums. They were just frauds, making up stuff. And then as you start, you know, talking to people that you trust or having these experiences for yourself, that needle starts to flip from the skeptical more to the full, believe everything no matter what. It just kind of starts to edge that way. And I think that your personal experiences have a lot to do with that.
Well, and the thing is, because I talked to my mom, not in a formal sense, but I lost my mom 5 years ago, and I'll be driving and just say, I miss you, Mom, and things like that. So I don't go into like a formal, possibly like a seance or a Ouija board or anything, but I just will verbally talk to her, and I wouldn't be freaked out if something happened amongst that. But the thing I think for me is that when you're actually trying to make contact, because I believe definitely in good and evil, and so I would never want to open that channel for something that's not good to come in either. So I think that's why I kind of fray away from it, because not that I think every time in every experience or anything, I'm not one of those that on the other side is like, oh, all ghosts are demons and all of it's demonic, because I don't think, I think that's a crock, but I do believe some of it is. And so I don't want to open that channel just in case, because once the channel's open, who knows what can come in there.
Well, I think that's a legitimate concern that I think most people have. And it's wise, I think, to follow your own intuition with that on, you know, what is safe. Blast from the past. So we all know Denise's famous line, but have either of you grown in your thoughts about tempting the spirits in the last 2 years?
Nope.
Well, that was worth the 4-minute clip.
Well, if this is any indication, we have t-shirts in our emporium, and we have ones that say don't tempt the spirit, but I also designed one that is hashtag spirit tempter, and I wear it. So
you were a troublemaker in the house.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have opened up a little bit more to it. I still am one of those people, you're probably not going to get me on a Ouija board, and I'm still not real, when people are doing the channeling thing and everything, still kind of worries me. But I think...
But you will offer our puppy to a ghost.
What?
Well, we were doing a ghost tour, and we got to go into this building that is now an office building, but it used to be a jail. And it has like death row on one of the levels, and they still have the trap where people would be hung, and the lever that you would pull the trap with. And when you looked up at the top of the ceiling, there was a big hook up there where they would put the rope, and there's all these cells there. And then you go downstairs, and there's the other part of the jail down there. And we weren't getting any activity because we'd gone in with the tour guide, and Denise had Tiana in the backpack on her back. And so I just thought, well, maybe we'll get some activity if we're talking to somebody and say, we have a cute little puppy here. Do you like the puppy? Denise was not pleased.
And that was in Natchez, actually, one of your favorite places, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we'll be in an old Ford and we're looking at stuff and she goes, "Oh, I think this is a cell. Is anybody in there?" And you can hear me on the tape go, "Diane." So she's definitely gotten a little bit more warm towards it. Now, there is an incident that happened one time that the term Timbunker.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
So, yeah, now, of course, Josh Wood took it all the way that we were using Ouija boards. And I'm like, no. But it was an instant where they were trying to communicate with lights, with flashlights. And he kept playing with a disco light at that bar. But he was timing. It was almost like
here's what happened. We got to give him the full story.
Okay, here we go.
We were on the Orlando ghost tour, and we went into this bar called the Treetop Inn. And you go upstairs, and he took us back into this back area where there was nobody. And they played the little flashlight game where you unscrew the flashlight so that it just goes off. And then you ask questions to get it to come on and off. And it was doing that. Well, in the back corner was this disco type ball that was, it had all these
lights.
Yeah, it had all these lights that would come on and it would flash every so often. And it wasn't really set on any kind of timing. It would just every so often come on. Well, every so often he would kind of talk back towards that light and say, "Well, can you turn that light on?" But the way he was speaking, it was almost like he would talk really slow. And then when he saw that it would come on, he'd speed up his voice so that it was kind of timed with the light. So we were pretty skeptical that anything paranormal was going on. So Denise thought she would test it.
Well, not totally. It came on. We were getting ready to leave and it came on. So just jokingly, because it was supposed to be kids, I went, "Boo." And it turned off immediately. And I was like, okay, that was kind of, good timing, coincidental. So, and it came right back on, which it hadn't done before. It had been like kind of more timed. And so I said, "Boo" again, and it turned off again. And I was like, okay, weird. And so I just, I was like, Julie, one of the girls that was with us, I'm like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "That's just kind of coincidental. That's kind of weird." So everybody said I was tempting the spirit. And I said, no, I was debunking what he was doing. So they came up with the terminology timbunking the spirit.
I love
it.
And
she did that boo thing more than twice, right?
Like 3 times, yeah. And it worked every time. And so then I was like, okay, dope. But now do I want to go back to the Treetop Inn? No, not at all.
I don't know. I think you're breaking your rules, Denise.
No, because I don't want to go back to that place again. So I'll watch. And I do love some of the ghost hunting tools now. I love the laser thing. I think that is the most amazing thing.
Grid.
The grid. Yeah. It's the most amazing thing they ever created just because it's fun to play with all the pretty lights and they're really cool looking. Mm-hmm. I like that. So.
But I also, if we go back, I also really liked what you had to say, Denise, about not having a problem with receiving, with saying hi or receiving a message from your mother who has passed. And I think all it has to be is something like that. It doesn't have to be something crazy and out there. I thought that was cool for you to say that.
Yeah, because that's what, like, if we were somewhere and something happened, because we go on ghost tours all the time, hearing the stories. And lately we've had opportunities to go into places that are haunted. Now it is things still like the one place we're in, they've said, "Oh, well, this might be a portal and bad things." I was like, okay, let's get out of this room now. So there's still certain things I'm like, don't want to be anywhere near this type of activity. But other things, because there's things that could happen. But when in Natchez, we couldn't take Tiana into the second location to go up, and I guess you could go up and basically tempt the spirit. So that's, I just stayed in the car with her. Diane went in to do the tempting and asking questions. So I still don't actively seek out, but if it were somebody that I knew, like especially my mom, because she's still very close to my heart, and if like I was thinking about her and I felt a brush or something, that wouldn't freak me out.
Well, and I think what has made me more comfortable with trying to interact with whatever is going on the other side, whatever is interacting with us, for me, it's just, we've had so many experiences now since we talked to you last, and none of them have been negative. So that has, I think, changed our comfort level a little bit, because we've been, like Denise said, we've gone into a lot of these locations now. We've had some things that we can explain happen. I don't know that it's necessarily a quote unquote spirit doing it, but nothing has happened to us where I've been freaked out or I've got to get away from this place or anything that felt threatening. So I think that's kind of what has eased me a little bit about that, is I'm not as worried about it, although we are very still protective. And when we leave an area, we make sure to let whatever may have tagged along with us know that it's not welcome to come in the car with us and come home with us.
That's interesting because I've always said the very same thing, that I don't worry so much anymore because nothing really scary has ever really happened. And, you know, I think a lot of people bring on the negativity themselves by expecting it, or, I don't know, talking about it, or even bringing it up.
Well, and you're like us, Patrick. You're very respectful. I think it's a lot of how you come into a location. We don't necessarily come in expecting anything to happen, and we're never disrespectful. We don't yell. We don't try to engage or say anything that would make a spirit feel threatened by us. So I think that's kind of the feeling. We're not getting anything threatening coming at us because we're not being threatening in return or at first.
Right, right. Well, as you know, we have a Facebook group here called the Big Seance Parlor, very similar to the Spooktacular crew. And I gave Paranerds the opportunity to submit questions. And Anna would like to know, what has been your favorite episode of HGB to research and why? And I'm sure this is kind of like picking your favorite child.
I was just about to say, gosh, every time somebody asks that, I usually say, well, the one I'm working on right now. It is very difficult. I do have some. What's really interesting is there are episodes I could tell you that I really didn't care for. The only reason we did it was because people asked us to do it. And I'll put it up and be like, nobody's going to listen to that. I'm just not really excited about it or anything. And those are the episodes that we get the most emails and stuff about in return.
Wow.
That people are the most excited about and are like, oh, I know that place. That's near here. Or I went to that university. And I'm always like, wow, like we did these 2 women universities in Texas. I'd never even heard of them. And I wasn't really excited about the episode, and I put it up, and we got a ton of emails of people who had been to them and were like, yeah, I've heard that story, and I had this experience. It's like, so every time I do that, I'm like, even though you don't feel very excited about that episode, just wait, Diane, that's the one that'll go.
And that keeps you going. That's cool.
Yeah. The ones that I've really liked are kind of the more far out ones. I love doing our Legends of the Fairies. That was a lot of fun to research that. Salem Witch Trials, I love that period of our history. Not that it was a good time, but I think it's a fascinating study in human nature. And so I really enjoyed that. And because we'd actually been to Salem and we'd been on the ghost tours and stuff there, had a little bit more feel for the stories and were able to share that a little bit more. I'm trying to think. There was another one. I'm a big fan of Elvis, so I really enjoy doing that. And Edgar Allan Poe, doing those ones were a lot of fun because those are the reason why I picked them as haunted people to do as some of our first episodes, was because they were some of my favorite people. So,
and you would have related to Poe because you're a writer as well.
Exactly. And the thing about Edgar Allan Poe is there was one Christmas that my folks were like, what would you like for a Christmas present? And I wanted the entire Edgar Allan Poe anthology. And I still have it to this day. And it's one of my favorite things. So he's just always been a part of my life. So
you started to say something, Denise.
I was going to say, and for me, the ones that I've enjoyed the most, because I don't do as much of the research, but I love doing the road trip episodes. Those are my favorites. Just because we're on the road, we're seeing really cool stuff, and then we're just kind of talking off the cuff about it and about what we just saw and what we just learned. So I don't have to do as much studying, but I just get to go out and experience it and then share those experiences with the listener. So those are my favorite ones to research, is the ones that we're going and seeing ourselves.
I do have to say, you guys are great at those on the road episodes. As someone who is attached to like a desktop computer most of the time when I podcast and I don't, do on the road very often, I'm impressed with how quickly you pump out the podcasts and you're on the road the whole time. It really is almost like we're traveling along with you on the trip.
And literally you are, because a lot of times when like we're talking, we're actually in the car and I'm driving. So I'm driving us through places, and Diane's just putting the microphone over whenever I need to answer. I just give her a signal if I want to say something. She sticks the microphone in my face while I'm driving down the road. So it's fun.
And because Denise is driving, I'm able to edit the audio because a lot of the time we have 6-7 hours between places. And so we have time to record and for me to edit it. And so far we've been pretty lucky because we do camping when we do the road trip thing. You generally found camp places that have some kind of Wi-Fi that we can upload to. If we can't find that, there's usually a Starbucks somewhere. And then we use their Wi-Fi to try to get the shows up.
And then I get coffee in a cup. So, hey.
Well, also from the parlor, John asked a great question, and he says, what is the most impactful paranormal experience that has happened to you to date? And people may remember, and we mentioned it, or it was actually mentioned in that clip I played, that the last time you were here, you'd recently had an experience where you were on a tour and you experienced some activity from a lamp in the room. Have you added other experiences to the list like that?
For me, yes. And the reason why this one is the most impactful, I think, of all the experiences that I've had in my life is it was a shared experience. And there is absolutely no way that this could have happened any other way than something supernatural, paranormal, something we could not see made this happen. When it comes to that lamp that you were talking about that we had on the Plymouth Ghost Tour, that one I still had questions about and wished that I could see if it had been plugged into a timer. You know, maybe somebody was playing with something, even though it was a shared experience where a whole bunch of us saw it come on and we debunked a lot of things. We weren't able to do that completely. But this experience that we had was at one of our favorite locations. We love the city of St. Augustine here in Florida. And we've been to the lighthouse there several times, and we've done the ghost tour there a couple of times. And what's really neat about it is after you get done doing the tour and getting the talk about the history, they set you free and you can just wander around and do your own little ghost hunting if you want to. And so on this particular tour, they have this area at the bottom of the lighthouse that has a bunch of things on display. And so I was walking through there with one of our listeners who had joined us on the tour. And Denise had been with us, but she wanted to see if she could go back up the lighthouse.
Yeah, so there was a different scene in opinions down on the first floor because everybody said, no, we can just stay on this floor. Some people said, well, we can go up to that landing. Some people are like, no, we can go all the way to the top. So I'm like, well, I want to go up to the top. I knew I couldn't go out on the catwalk, but I wanted to go all the way back up to the top at night. And I thought that would be really cool, just because I love lighthouses. And so I went outside to find out, we didn't want to break a rule. So I wanted to find out how high up we could go.
And the way the door is set up there is it was just kind of left cracked open. And so Julie and I are looking at these different displays, and all of a sudden we hear this knocking on the door and like somebody's trying to come in. And we kind of looked at each other and went, what's the problem? The door's cracked. They should be able to get in. So the knocking continues. So we go over to the door and it is closed now. And I noticed that it has this little, it's like a little knob on it that is kind of poking out. It's like it's almost like an old time deadbolt, but it's not a deadbolt. It's a really small little turn thing. And it kind of popped out of the wood. So I thought, oh, did something break on the door? So that's why it's sticking, because we could tell that Denise was on the other side of the door trying to come in. And so I reached down to try to open it, and I'm grabbing the doorknob and I'm yanking on this side and the door's not opening. So I'm thinking, well, maybe this little lock thing broke somehow, although I couldn't figure out how it would have locked or anything like that. And we had another one of our listeners. He was this really big kid, and he came over and I said, well, maybe you can get it to unstick, because we're just in our minds thinking that the door is sticking for some reason. So he's trying to pull and see if he can get the door open.
Well, and on my side, Diane's dad was with me trying to push from the other side, trying to open the door.
So we're not getting the door to budge at all. And then finally, one of the tour guides comes over and he gets out his key and he unlocks the deadbolt, which had nothing to do with this little screw thing that I'd seen had popped out. Because I asked him, I said, oh, was the door sticking because this locky thing broke? And he goes, that has nothing to do with the door anymore. He goes, that is an old thing. It had a certifiable deadbolt, like a regular deadbolt that you have on every other door out there. He had the only key to that deadbolt, and he had to use the key to unlock it. And so we're like, how did that door lock? Because Denise went out and then she was coming back in. Nobody else had been near the door. He was all the way across the yard and he just happened to come over because he saw everybody struggling with the door. And then he proceeded to tell us that the little girl ghosts that haunt the place, that's one of their favorite things to do, and that had been happening quite a bit on tours lately. And so, it was one of those things where after the fact, you're like, wow, we just had a supernatural experience. But when it was happening, we had no idea. And you just get this kind of chill because you're like, okay, there's something in here with us that we can't see, decided to play a trick on us. And somehow, even though we could not see it, feel it, smell it, anything, it was able to reach around to the other side of the door and lock that deadbolt, because it was one of those deadbolts that you have to use a key on both sides. It doesn't have a little turn thing. So we're like, how did it lock the deadbolt without a key? And we all experienced it together. There was a group of us. We were trying to get that door open, and the fact that he had to come over and he had the only key that would unlock that, I went, wow. I don't know how I can explain that as anything other than something supernatural just happened here. That deadbolt could not have just all of a sudden fallen into the lock thing.
And to put it a little bit into perspective, when I went out of the lighthouse, it's not like I went really far. I went maybe 30 feet. And I saw somebody, I asked them and turned around and went right back in. So we're talking maybe not even 5 minutes, probably 3 minutes that I was out of the lighthouse. So it wasn't like I was gone a long time and somebody else could have gone to play some sort of a trick. I was right there within sight of the door because I ran out, and as soon as I saw the person, I asked them and ran right back in. Well, didn't run right back in, ran right back to the door.
So I don't know if that is your most chilling type experience that you've had, Denise, but for me, that to me was, because a lot of other ones I can try to come up with some other reasons why they've happened, but with that one, I have nothing.
No, that would probably be it for me too.
Well, those are the experiences that you have to experience yourself that shape, your beliefs and what you believe about this stuff, that you just can't buy those. That's, do you have a cool feeling about that? It's nothing that like bugs you or keeps you up at night, is it?
Oh,
no, I wasn't scared at all. As a matter of fact, that's why when people say, if you were to see a full-bodied apparition, what would you do? I used to say, I would run like hell. But now I honestly don't know what I would do, because every time we have an experience, I'm more in awe. It's like I'm a little bit shocked that it happened. And then I'm like, how did that happen? And then when I get to the point where I'm like, that might have been something supernatural, I'm more like, it's almost like I'm like, well, that was cool. So I'm kind of in awe that, wow, something just happened here. And I guess it's kind of nice when you are somebody who is an open-minded skeptic, because it's like we're not closed off to it. And I like for things to validate the being open-minded. It's like I want to believe that it's there. And so when something happens like that, because for a long time, we'd go on ghost tours and tell people, don't worry about it, like our neighbor. She's like, I don't want to go on a ghost tour with you guys. I'm afraid of ghosts. And we would always tell her, well, nothing ever happens. So, come with us. And now we can't say that, because I don't know if it's as you get more involved with it, maybe they get more comfortable with you, or you've opened the door more. But it just seems like we have a lot more experiences now. I'll tell you, at the conference, I was doing a little bit of spirit tempting, I guess you could say. And I caught what I think are 3 different EVPs in 3 different locations. And that to me is just mind-boggling, because we never would ever catch anything. And now I'm sitting here going, how can I have these 3 little clips? And on all 3 of them, I'm like, whoa, I just heard something there. One of them was, we were talking with Dana Matthews and Greg Newkirk. And she was just talking a little bit about, we were asking, are you afraid to have things in your house? And how do you do your cleansing and all this kind of stuff? And as I'm listening to it, I hear 2 knocks. And it wasn't like when somebody knocks on a door, or if somebody was knocking on a table nearby, it sounded almost distant, kind of muffled. And since a lot of their haunted things are kept in boxes.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
It made me think that I just got the feel when I was listening to it that it was something that was knocking inside of something. And I was like, because I don't know how I would have picked up something like that. And it was just in the background. And so when I heard it, at first I was like, oh my God, it kind of wigged me out a little bit. But then I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And I wonder if that was. And they told us the story too about, I think, the haunted clown that they had at the very front of the table.
Mm-hmm.
And when it walks, I guess it sounds like bones cracking. And so now I'm kind of wondering if maybe that was what the knocking was, because they were telling us that it has this kind of distinctive sound that they've picked up a few times. And
you'll come into a house and you'll experience scratching and negative. You'll come into a house and you'll experience scratching and negative. You'll come into a house and you'll experience scratching and negative.
So, yeah, it's been weird. It just seems like things happen more often to us now because we have opened up maybe a little bit more to it.
Well, when you said that you had the knocking, that freaked me way out because they also have the crone. And so I was like, oh my gosh, there was knocking. So I'm like, okay, sage, cleanse, whatever, get it away from me. So I'm not quite as comfortable as Diane yet because, like, at first I was like, okay, and I've warmed up to Billy and stuff like that. I still don't want to hold him or touch him, but I'm like, oh, it's kind of sad that, this thing might be caught and screaming, and then, now it's starting to come along. So it is kind of when you hear them talk about him, but when the crone and stuff, and people are like, do you want to see it? Do you want to look in the mirror? I'm like, no, thank you. No, thanks.
Well, it kind of makes you want to go back and listen to every piece of audio you've ever recorded. And that's what is kind of overwhelming to me when I was doing so much EVP several years ago. You don't know where to stop almost, and you just dig into everything. And once you find a few EVPs, it's like it's an addiction. You just want to look for more. Do you think you'd ever get into doing more EVP stuff?
I think I will. I definitely, and I almost could see myself trying out the ghost hunting thing rather than just we're on a ghost tour exploring maybe the inside of a place and I'm recording and maybe asking a couple questions here, but actually sitting down for several hours in a location and seeing what happens. I could see myself trying something like that.
Can I tell you a story? When we were, I went on one of the after hours events I did at the conference this last weekend, was the investigation at the Mineral Springs Hotel, which I'd been to one other time, but I'd never been really up onto the second floor, down to the basement, and in an investigative setting. And this was all night. And I'm sitting there with a group who'd I just met, another woman who was very savvy when it came to investigation and tools. And so I'm going to have to look her up and try to connect with her. But there were 3 or 4 of us, and we were in the ballroom of the Mineral Springs Hotel. And one of the reports in a corner of this ballroom were shadows. And this was probably halfway through the night. It was getting kind of late. And we were seeing some shadow stuff going on. They were seeing it more than I was. But I was, you're not sure if your mind's playing tricks on you, if you're really seeing shadows, and we're really paying attention and are focused on it. And there's a stairwell off to our left, this massive stairwell coming down into the ballroom. And we'd asked a few questions to try to connect with it. And we hear these thumps, and all of a sudden, in the light that we had pointed toward the area of the ballroom with the shadows, a red tennis ball rolls right in front of us.
Wow.
A tennis ball had bounced down the stairwell right in front of us, and someone ran up to see if anybody was up and around that area, and there was no one there. And that was, and my skeptical side is still kind of bouncing around on that one, but I'm like, wow.
Did any of you bring that ball with you?
No, someone had mentioned, and I took a picture of it. Someone had mentioned seeing the red ball around up the top of the stairwell, but around the corner. So it's not really perfectly at the top of the stairwell. It was around the corner, and there was a fire extinguisher, and the ball was kind of wrenched up on the top by the handle of the fire extinguisher, propped up there on top of the fire extinguisher. And someone mentioned seeing it there before. And so we went up there and we tried to, we tried to Tim bunk it, Denise,
Sure.
and placed it up there and tried to get it to roll down around the corner with enough energy to bounce down this stairwell. And it would have had to have been a massive amount of energy to fall down the stairwell, at least from that point. So it's hard to know for sure, but it was so very interesting. It's one of those to add to my list.
Well, that definitely sounds like something to me. And when we were doing the ghost tour, we go into the mineral springs. We don't go up to, we're just on that main level where the stores are at there.
Uh-huh. Cool place.
Yeah, and they have that museum of torture devices back there in the back.
Uh-huh.
And I'll have to send this over to you, but I was just kind of back there and I was like, oh, is there anybody in here? And then some other people came over and were kind of visiting with me, but I was holding my little recorder so that it was inside the gate that's there. And I was listening back to the audio on it, and I definitely feel like I picked up a male voice. It's probably, I would say it's category B. So it's you can kind of hear that there's something there, but you can't really understand what it's saying. But it sounded to me, as I kept listening to it, that it said something like, please God. And then there's a little bit of a garble, and then you can almost hear it saying something like, get out, but it's not a mean get out, like get out. It was more like it was part of a sentence that they were saying, almost like, please God, help me get out. Or
I can't imagine the energy that would be attached to torture devices.
Yeah, and that's what I was just thinking. I was sitting there going,
wow.
Well, he did a good job if he was a drunk. But that is. Well, he did a good job if he was a drunk. But that is. Well, he did a good job if he was a drunk. But that is.
and it's there was no male around me, and it feels like most of the time when people pick up an EVP, you pick up the EVPs when you're not planning on it. It's not a question and answer session where you're like, are you here? How old are you? It seems like most of the time when people catch an EVP, it's because you're talking and doing something else, and it happens to come in through that.
Kind of accidental.
Yes, and that's kind of all of the EVPs that I caught on this trip. That's exactly what they were. We were not trying to really capture anything necessarily, wasn't expecting anything. And all 3 times when I heard these, I was like, sat up in my chair and went, oh my gosh, I think I actually caught something. It's like catching a fish, I guess.
It is. It's very cool. It's like a competition.
Exactly.
Well, it's kind of cute with Diane, too, because she made a really good point. The one time when they were trying to do the flashlight thing, and she goes, because, Diane thinks kind of her own way. And she goes, I wonder if these spirits, like, they're here for hundreds of years, and we all ask them the exact same thing. Are you sad? What is your name? Blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I wonder if they just get bored with what we're saying. And so it's funny when you listen to her, when she does do things, it's usually things that aren't the norm, like, who are you?
Do you like tacos?
Yeah, well, no, or she'll just be like, oh, I like that brooch or something like that,
Well, what Denise is referring to specifically is generally I'll just have a conversation. And what had happened is when we were in Natchez, there was the place that she couldn't go in with Tiana, and I believe it's called the King's Inn.
Yeah.
And so you could go up to the 3rd floor. Did you get to go inside there at all?
When we went, we were only there for a 24-hour period. We weren't aware that Natchez was such a cool place. My mother and I both decided that if we went back, we'd spend the whole time in Natchez. But when we were there that day, the restaurant was closed.
What a bummer. So
and it was because of what you said about wanting more time in Natchez that I purposely booked 2 nights there.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, what happened is the tour guide, she was a little on the heavy side, so she didn't really want to go up all these stairs because they're kind of narrow and it's harder to get up there. So she gave me the EMF and the flashlight and said, go have fun. So I went upstairs and, I was sitting up there and I did the little flashlight thing so that it was just barely on. And I set the EMF down next to it. And so I was just kind of wandering around the room and I said, you're probably really tired of people saying, Are you here? Are you sad? Did he kill you? Because it's supposedly the mistress, she was a slave, and as typically happened back then, started having an affair with the man of the house, and then they end up dead. And so I was just kind of visiting with her along those lines and saying that, and nothing was happening. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go downstairs. I'm wasting my time here. And so I unscrewed the flashlight so that it wouldn't come back on, but I was still holding the EMF. And so I just said, well, I'm going to go downstairs and hang out with the rest of the people. If you want to come down, great. I don't even know if you're here. And it just went from the regular green to the little light green. And I thought, well, that could be anything. So I go down the first landing, and right there at the top of the landing is this huge picture of this woman who I assumed was the woman who had died there. Mm-hmm. And so I noticed that she was wearing this really cool, it's like how women put their hair up and then they put a pin through it? Mm-hmm. It was this really cool pin, and it was kind of coiled at the end of it. And so I just said, wow, I'm not sure if this is you in the picture, but you were a beautiful woman. And I really love that pin in your hair. And the EMF went to red. And I was like, whoa, I'm getting some kind of a response here. So I was like, so I'm taking it that you really like that pin. And it goes bam to red. So then I started holding the EMF because like you, I've got to debunk this stuff. So I'm like, well, maybe there's something behind the picture, the electrical box or something back there that's causing this to go off. And I'm holding that EMF all over that picture, and I'm getting nothing registering with it. And so then I just made another comment. I just said, well, I sure would love to have something like that for my hair, but my hair's too short for that. And it didn't go to red, but it went up to yellow. And then I was like, well, I'll just go on downstairs now. But I thought, wow. And so I think that might be why, because I was getting nothing. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't having a conversation with anything, but I was getting nothing until I was just kind of having a regular conversation and probably making a comment that had never been made before. Mm-hmm. And I got a response to that. And what was really cool too about that place, if you ever get a chance to go, ask the owner or the bartender if you can see the video that they got, because they have one of those little refrigerators underneath the bar, like which you would see in a hotel room. And they keep wine and stuff that they've opened in that. And one day they came in and it was wide open. And the owner was really upset. And he had this worker who he'd been wanting to fire. And he was like, I know it was him. And this will be my chance. We'll have caught it on tape, because he looks up to the corner there and he's like, there's our closed circuit TV. So we would have caught it on tape, and I'm going to catch him in the act. And now we'll be able to, fire him. So he's watching the videotape that they made. And it's right clear as day, right focused on that refrigerator. You can see that there is nobody in the bar, and that refrigerator. And as everybody knows, refrigerators, they don't just open. You have to give them a little bit of a tug to get them to start opening, because they have that seal on them. Right. And you just see it opens, and it just swings open very, very slowly. It opens all the way to open, and it stays that way. And I was like, if I trust that you guys weren't pulling something here. And I believed the owner. He seemed awfully legit about the whole thing. I was like, wow. And so the fact that I got this weird EMF and then I watched this video, I was like, oh, that might be something going on there.
Denise, your wife is becoming more of a tempter than I realized.
I'm telling you, that's why I'm like, okay. Yeah, because, even when we're just walking around places that are historicals, and she'll be like, hi, is there anybody in there? And I'm like, Diane.
Well, before we go, I want to just mention some of your most recent shows and locations that you've covered. You have Ontario's Fort Henry, the Henry Ford Museum, and Greenfield Village. Haunted Cemeteries, you did an episode on that. Old South, Pittsburgh Hospital, Ernestine and Hazel's Juke Joint, Haunted Ships of Baltimore, Appalachian State University, Shiloh Inn in Salt Lake City, The History of Ghost Hunting, which I thought was cool, Philadelphia City Hall, and one on Shakespeare and ghosts. Before you leave, can you give us any hints as to what's next?
Well, we do have some more people that we will be interviewing. I can tell you in July that we are going to be doing a location in Savannah. We are going to be featuring Preston Castle, which is over in California, and it's a very haunted location. And we're going to have a woman on with us who will have just gotten done doing a ghost hunt there with her group. So she's going to share anything that they caught there and tell us about the history and the hauntings. And we had on one of our episodes, we talked to one of our listeners who's over in Albania, and he's going to be back in the States in the month of July. And he said, I have some more legends from the Balkans if you'd like to have me come on and share them. So we'll probably have that in July as well.
Very cool. Well, I look forward to it. You guys have been so successful. Your podcast is hugely popular, and I am so glad that we are nerdy buds and that we've made this connection, and we have a lot of, shared listeners. And so I keep coming back to community. It's kind of cool to be working together on another episode and seeing each other at conferences. Why don't you guys tell us where we can find you and close out with any closing thoughts you have before we go?
Our website is historygoesbump.com, and at the top there it has all the little links to where you can find us on social media. We're on everything from Twitter to Tumblr to Instagram, Facebook, you name it, even though we don't know some of the stuff. Not Snapchat, because I still haven't been able to figure out what that is.
I'm not snapping either.
Yeah, pretty much everything out there, we've learned how to get involved with it and use it. So we spread it out all over there. And if anybody wants to contact us with suggestions, historygoesbump@gmail.com.
That's my line.
Oh, I'm sorry, Denise. I stole it from you.
Redo it. Let her do it.
And Denise, if people want to send us some feedback or suggestions, where can they do that?
They can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com.
You guys rock. Thanks for coming on again.
Well, thank you for having us, Patrick. You have been one of our podcast friends from almost the very beginning when we all started. So it's been kind of cool to watch us all grow as we've muddled along here. And I remember when we all first started doing this thing, when you tell people you did a podcast, they still kind of looked at you cross-eyed. Now, it's like everybody has their own podcast.
Yeah.
Patrick's been with us all the way back to Mary Jane.
That is true. Mary Jane Candy.
Boy.
Oh, my God.
Yep. And who's your favorite Disney villain?
There we go.
Maleficent, of course.
Well, you guys rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. Just click on the Big Seance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, and iHeartRadio. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. Your Paranerd hashtag today is Spirit Tempter. So tweet me at Big Seance and Diane and Denise at History Goes Bump and use the hashtag Spirit Tempter. All one word. See ya.